In 2001, a motorcycle Grand Prix racer produced close to 185 horsepower from an engine smaller than what sits in most family sedans. It weighed 131 kilograms. It had zero traction control, zero electronic rider aids, and the kind of power delivery that could snap the rear wheel sideways with a millimeter too much throttle. Riders and journalists came to call these machines the unridables. One world champion was paralyzed, another nearly lost a leg, and others retired with bodies wrecked from years of trying to tame them. And by the early years of the century, the sports rule makers and manufacturers had decided the future belonged to four strokes. That was 2001. This pattern of killing brilliant engines started 55 years earlier. The two-stroke Grand Prix bike is the most famous example, but it is far from the only motorcycle engine design that was too good to be legal. From supercharged pre-war BMWs to oval-piston Hondas that disguised a V8 as a V4, from rotary-powered Nortons that embarrassed Japanese factories and got the rulebook rewritten, to a garage-built masterpiece from New Zealand that proved it could beat major factory superbikes, but could not meet the paperwork requirements to race against them. The history of motorcycle engineering is a story of people building something extraordinary, and then someone else writing a rule to make sure it could never happen again. This is the full story, every banned engine, every killed design, and the uncomfortable truth about who really decides what counts as too fast. When Grand Prix motorcycle racing resumed after World War II, the very first major rule change shut the door on forced induction. In 1946, the governing body of international motorcycle sport prohibited all forms of supercharging and turbocharging from road racing. The official rationale centered on safety and cost, but the decision also froze out a technology that had given pre-war German and Italian machines a devastating advantage. Before the war, supercharged motorcycles from Germany and Italy were absolutely demolishing British-built bikes on the racetrack. The BMW Type 255 compressor was a 492 cubic centimeter supercharged flat twin that Georg Meyer rode to victory at the 1939 Isle of Man Senior TT. That race was historic for two reasons. It was the first Senior TT ever won by a non-British rider on a non-British machine since the race began in 1907. And Ernst Henny had already pushed a supercharged BMW to 173 miles per hour in land speed record runs. The Galera Rondine, a supercharged four-cylinder from Italy, powered Piero Taruffi to the motorcycle world land speed record. The AJS supercharged V4 produced 55 horsepower and lapped the Ulster Grand Prix circuit at over 100 miles per hour, the first time any road racing circuit had been lapped at that speed. The British motorcycle industry, companies like Norton and Velocette and AJS, could not afford to develop forced induction technology. With Germany already banned from international competition as a post-war penalty, the supercharger prohibition leveled a playing field that had been tilted decisively toward German and Italian engineering. The last victory for a supercharged racing motorcycle came at the 1946 Grand Prix des Frontières at Chimay, where Jacques West won on the AJS Vi-4. After that, forced induction in motorcycle racing was gone. It has stayed banned for nearly 80 years and still applies to every FIM road racing series today. With superchargers off the table, engineers needed a different path to more power. And one engineer in particular found it under deeply unusual circumstances. Walter Kaden was the chief engineer at the MZ motorcycle factory in communist East Germany. He had studied exhaust gas dynamics during World War II rocket research, and he applied that knowledge to two-stroke expansion chambers. His work transformed the two-stroke from a simple, low-power design into something capable of challenging four strokes head-to-head. The expansion chamber he developed used the pressure waves of exhaust gases to effectively supercharge the engine naturally, ramming unburned fuel back into the cylinder before the port closed. It was the kind of discovery that would have been worth millions to any racing manufacturer. And in 1961, one man carried it across the Iron Curtain. MZ rider Ernst Degner was heading for the 125 cubic centimeter World Championship when he defected from East Germany during the Swedish Grand Prix at Kristianstad. He smuggled his family across the border and brought Kaden's two-stroke expansion chamber knowledge with him, signing a consulting contract with Suzuki reportedly worth £10,000 along with a factory race seat. Kaden, still trapped behind the Iron Curtain, could only watch as his life's work powered Japanese motorcycles to world championships. It was a genuine Cold War espionage act, and it changed motorcycle racing forever. Within a decade, two-stroke technology was catching and then passing four-stroke performance in the 500 cubic centimeter Grand Prix class. In 1971, Jack Findlay scored the first Premier Class two-stroke victory at the Ulster Grand Prix on a Suzuki. By 1975, Giacomo Agostini won the 500 cubic centimeter World Championship on a Yamaha YZR 500. No four-stroke engine would win the Premier Class championship again for 27 years. The physics behind the two-stroke advantage is simple. A two-stroke engine fires every crankshaft revolution. A four-stroke fires every other revolution. Given equal displacement, a two-stroke theoretically produces twice the power events per rotation. When the FIM rules allowed both engine types to compete at 500 cubic centimeters with a maximum of 4 cylinders, the two-stroke held a devastating inherent advantage. Through the late 1970s and the 1980s, the power escalation was relentless. The Yamaha YZR 500 started around 95 horsepower in the mid-1970s. By the early 1980s, any competitive 500 cubic centimeter Grand Prix bike needed at least 130 horsepower. The Honda NSR 500 reached 185 horsepower with fuel injection by 1993. That same year, Shinichi Ito reportedly became the first Grand Prix rider to hit 200 miles per hour at Hockenheim. By the final generation in 2001, the NSR 500 was producing around 180 horsepower from 499 cubic centimeters, while weighing only 131 kilograms dry. That is a power-to-weight ratio of roughly 1.4 horsepower per kilogram, which was comparable to contemporary Formula One cars. The riders who tamed these bikes were a different breed entirely. Kenny Roberts won 3 consecutive titles from 1978 to 1981 Yamaha, revolutionizing Grand Prix technique by importing American flat-track sliding into road racing. Freddie Spencer won the 1983 championship on Honda and then became the only rider in history to win both the 250 cubic centimeter and 500 cubic centimeter world titles in the same season in 1985. Eddie Lawson won 4 titles across Yamaha and Honda and proved his adaptability by switching manufacturers and winning immediately. Wayne Rainey won 3 consecutive titles from 1990 to 1992. Kevin Schwantz took the 1993 title on Suzuki with an all-or-nothing riding style that won 25 Grand Prix races. And Mick Doohan dominated the mid-1990s with 5 consecutive championships from 1994 to 1998, winning 12 of 15 races in 1997 alone. The final two-stroke champion was Valentino Rossi in 2001. He later said that Honda's 4-stroke RC211V was fast, but nowhere near as terrifying as the NSR 500 two-stroke. And terrifying is the right word. The power delivery on these machines was violently abrupt. The engine would idle at low RPM like a slightly aggressive lawnmower, and then within a few hundred RPM it would unleash everything all at once. Riders called it the power band, and hitting it mid-corner on a wet track was like grabbing a live wire. There was 0 traction control, 0 wheelie control, 0 quick shifter, 0 electronics of any kind between the rider's right wrist and catastrophe. Modern MotoGP bikes have dozens of sensors and multiple layers of electronic intervention. These 500 cubic centimeter two-strokes had a throttle cable and a prayer. Wayne Rainey was paralyzed from the waist down after crashing at Misano in 1993 while leading the World Championship. He high-sided coming out of a corner when the rear tire gripped suddenly after a slide, launching him over the handlebars. Mick Doohan nearly had his right leg amputated after a crash at the 1992 Dutch TT at Assen. He spent months in surgery and rehabilitation, returned to racing with a modified bike that compensated for his damaged leg, and then won 5 consecutive world championships. Kevin Schwantz retired due to accumulated injuries, his body simply unable to absorb any more punishment from crashes. These were the most talented motorcycle racers alive, and the bikes were still breaking them. The Honda NSR 500 became the most successful of all, collecting 10 world championships and over 100 race victories across its 18-year production run from 1984 to 2002. Its 112-degree V4 engine pioneered the revolutionary Big Bang firing order in 1992, clustering all four-cylinder firings within 65 to 70 degrees of crankshaft rotation instead of spacing them evenly. This gave the rear tire a chance to recover between power pulses and dramatically improved traction. The Yamaha YZR500 competed for 30 seasons and won 115 races and 11 championships. Suzuki's 500 cubic centimeter two-stroke lineage delivered titles for Barry Sheene on the RG500 in 1976 and 1977, and then later for Kevin Schwantz and Kenny Roberts Jr. on the RGV500. Now, while two-strokes were ruling the track, one company decided to fight the tide in the most spectacularly stubborn way imaginable. Honda's founder, Soichiro Honda, famously dismissed two-stroke engines as bamboo tubes unworthy of serious engineering. When he insisted Honda return to Grand Prix racing using four-stroke technology in the late 1970s, engineer Shoichiro Irimajiri faced a problem. The FIM rules allowed a maximum of 4 cylinders at 500 cubic centimeters. A four-stroke V4 simply could not match a two-stroke V4 for outright power. Irimajiri wanted to build a V8, which would allow smaller pistons, higher revs, and more power. The four-cylinder rule said no. So his team at Honda's research facility in Tochigi did something that borders on engineering insanity. They fused pairs of cylinders together to create oval-shaped pistons that were essentially 2 round pistons joined side by side. Each cylinder contained 8 valves, 2 connecting rods, and 2 spark plugs. 4 cylinders, 32 valves, 8 connecting rods. It was a V8 wearing a V4 disguise. The challenges were extraordinary. Conventional round piston rings maintain uniform pressure through radial expansion. Oval rings cannot do this, and Honda eventually needed 27 separate machining operations per piston ring to achieve constant bearing pressure around the non-uniform shape. The twin connecting rods per piston created asymmetric forces that caused sudden piston disintegration above 10,000 RPM during early testing. Every single component was a first-of-its-kind engineering problem with zero precedent. The Honda NR500 debuted at the 1979 British Grand Prix at Silverstone with riders Mick Grant and Takazumi Katayama, the 1977 350 cubic centimeter world champion. Grant crashed on the opening corner. Katayama retired on lap 7 with engine failure. At the French Grand Prix later that year, both bikes failed to qualify entirely, and officials physically removed them from the pre-grid. The press nicknamed the bike Never Ready. The paddock laughed. Honda's own riders reportedly dreaded being assigned to the project. The embarrassment continued through 1980 and 1981. Pistons would crack, conrods would snap, and the engine would detonate without warning. Honda poured money into the program at a rate that would have funded an entire two-stroke racing effort many times over. The NR500's power progressed from roughly 100 horsepower at debut to 135 horsepower at 19,000 RPM by 1982, but two-stroke rivals were already beyond 120 and climbing fast. The four-stroke's inherent weight penalty of roughly 20 kilograms negated any gains. Across its entire competitive career, the NR500 never scored a single championship point. Its best Grand Prix finish was 13th place. By 1982, Honda gave up and switched to the two-stroke NS500, which Freddie Spencer rode to the 1983 title. Honda's stubborn four-stroke experiment had cost years and a fortune, but it was far from over. If Honda had stopped there, the NR500 would be a footnote. They did not stop there. Honda poured the oval-piston technology into the NR750 street bike in 1992. It was a hand-built, $50,000 collector's motorcycle limited to just 322 units. Its 747 cubic centimeter V4 produced 125 horsepower at 14,000 RPM through 32 titanium valves, 8 titanium connecting rods, and 8 spark plugs. It remains the only production motorcycle ever built with oval pistons, and it spawned design talent that went on to create the CBR 900RR Fireblade and the RC211V MotoGP racer. Later Grand Prix regulations specified that pistons and cylinders must have circular cross-sections, permanently closing the loophole Honda had tried to exploit. Honda holds over 200 patents on the technology that nobody is allowed to race. If you're enjoying this deep dive into banned motorcycle engineering, hit subscribe. We cover stories like this every week. So Honda tried to outsmart the rules with oval pistons and failed on the track. Meanwhile, an engineer in England was about to outsmart the rules with a completely different engine type, and this time it worked so well that the rules had to change. Brian Crichton was a former three-time British 50 cubic centimeter champion who joined Norton's service department in 1984 and built the first racing rotary prototype in a caretaker's shed using a scrapped police motorcycle engine. Not a purpose-built racing power plant, a decommissioned engine from a Norton Interpol police bike. The Norton Rotary used a 588 cubic centimeters twin-rotor Wankel engine mounted in a Spondon Engineering aluminum beam frame, and the whole package weighed just 145 kilograms race-ready. Crichton's breakthrough was an exhaust ejector system that applied two-stroke expansion chamber principles to Wankel exhaust gases, nearly doubling the engine's output from roughly 80 horsepower to over 135 horsepower. The classification was inherently controversial. A Wankel engine has no pistons at all, and different organizations applied multipliers ranging from 1.5 to 2.0 to calculate equivalency with conventional piston engines. Norton even made wildcard appearances in the 500 cubic centimeters World Championship Grand Prix class, with Ron Haslam scoring points at the 1991 British Grand Prix at Donington Park. For British superbike racing, a 1.7 multiplier placed it at roughly 1,000 cubic centimeters equivalent. But the Norton's greatest impact came in domestic British racing and the Isle of Man TT. The results were electric. In 1989, Norton obliterated rivals on the Snetterton Straight during a live television broadcast, the rotary spitting flames from its exhausts as it screamed past Japanese four-cylinder superbikes. In 1992, Steve Hislop won the senior TT at the Isle of Man on the Norton Rotary by just 4 seconds over Carl Fogarty in what is considered one of the greatest TT duels ever fought on the mountain course. It was Norton's first TT victory since 1961, 3 decades earlier. In 1994, Ian Simpson won the British Superbike Championship on a Crichton-developed Norton Rotary, beating factory-supported Japanese teams with a fraction of their budget. Honda rider Terry Reimer captured the frustration of the opposition. He said he was fed up with those Nortons passing by and spitting flames in his face. The response came quickly. For the 1995 season, British superbike rules shifted toward production-based piston engines only, and the Wankel no longer fit the formula. Norton was already collapsing financially, and the rule change killed the Rotary's racing future. The parallel with car racing is impossible to ignore. After Mazda's rotary-powered 787B won the 1991 Le Mans 24 Hours, rule changes effectively barred rotary engines from top-class endurance racing there too. Once it became clear how competitive these alternative designs could be, the rules moved in a different direction. Speaking of engines that the market rejected before regulators even had to get involved, the 1970s and the 1980s saw two separate dead-end technologies reach production motorcycles and fail spectacularly. The Suzuki RE5, built from 1974 to 1976, was the only Wankel rotary motorcycle from a Japanese manufacturer. Its 497 cubic centimeter single rotor engine produced 62 horsepower, which was decent. Everything else was a disaster. It weighed 507 pounds, got 25 to 35 miles per gallon, required 5 separate throttle cables operating 3 different systems, and featured styling by Giorgetto Giugiaro, so divisive that Suzuki redesigned the instrument panel for the second model year. Only 6,000 were built, and Cycle World later named it one of the 10 worst motorcycles ever made. The Hercules W2000 beat it to market as the first production Wankel motorcycle, but it only managed 32 horsepower, and it suffered from insurance companies misclassifying its displacement into superbike risk categories. Then came the Turbo Wars. In 1982, Honda launched the CX500 Turbo as the first mass-produced turbocharged motorcycle, with 82 horsepower from a 497 cubic centimeter V-twin, and the first electronic fuel injection system ever fitted to a Honda motorcycle. The company filed over 230 patents during development. This triggered an immediate arms race. Yamaha answered with the XJ650 Seika Turbo at 90 horsepower. It was the only carbureted turbo bike, and it appeared in the James Bond film Never Say Never Again. Suzuki built the XN85 at 85 horsepower, of which only 1,153 were ever made. Honda upgraded to the CX650 Turbo at 100 horsepower. Kawasaki's GPZ 750 Turbo was widely considered the best of all, with 112 horsepower and a top speed of 148 miles per hour. All four manufacturers abandoned turbo motorcycles within 2 years. The reasons were painfully consistent. Turbo lag made them unpredictable in corners. They were heavier and more expensive than naturally aspirated alternatives. And advances in multi-valve engine design meant that bikes like the Kawasaki GPZ 900R and Suzuki GSX R750 could match turbo power without the complexity. Forced induction had been banned from FYM racing since that 1946 rule we talked about earlier, so turbo bikes could never compete anyway. Now for what might be the most heartbreaking story in all of motorcycle engineering. John Britten built what many consider the greatest motorcycle ever made in a workshop in Christchurch, New Zealand, with second-hand lathes, a small team, and zero factory backing. The Britten V1000 was a 999 cubic centimeters water-cooled 60-degree V-twin with a claimed 166 horsepower in a frameless carbon fiber chassis weighing just 138 kilograms. To put that in perspective, that is a better power-to-weight ratio than any factory superbike of the era, and Britten achieved it without a single dollar of corporate funding. Every detail was revolutionary for the early 1990s. The engine served as a fully stressed structural member, meaning there was no frame at all. The bodywork was carbon fiber and Kevlar. The front suspension used a double wishbone girder system instead of conventional telescopic forks. The radiator sat under the seat, ducted by aerodynamic bodywork. And it carried a programmable ECU with data logging, before most factory teams had figured out how to use a laptop at the racetrack. Britten even cast his own engine cases in a homemade foundry behind his house. The racing results were astonishing. The Britten won the Battle of the Twins at Daytona multiple times, with rider Andrew Stroud taking 4 victories in total. It won the 1995 Bears World Championship. On December 4th, 1993, rider John White set the FIM Certified Flying Mile world record for motorcycles under 1,000 cubic centimeters at 188 miles per hour in Christchurch, New Zealand. That record has stood for over 30 years and remains unbroken. Motorcycle journalist Alan Cathcart, one of the most respected testers in the world, wrote after riding a Britten that it was the closest thing to a Grand Prix bike he had ever experienced and the most sophisticated motorcycle on the planet, from New Zealand of all places. The Britten could never race in World Superbike. Only 10 were ever built, thousands short of what homologation rules required. John Britten himself said he had reached the point where he was stuck unless he could get through the homologation business. He died of cancer on September 5, 1995, at 45 years old. His team completed the final bikes through 1998, fulfilling his dying wish. No specific rule was written against the Britten V1000. It was simply too rare and too hand-built to qualify for production-based racing. The 10 surviving machines are now valued at over £250,000 each and sit in museums, including Te Papa in New Zealand and the Barber Vintage Motorsports Museum in Alabama. The final chapter in the two-stroke story came in 2002 when the FIM rebranded the Premier class as MotoGP and offered a choice: keep racing 500 cubic centimeter two-strokes or build new 990 cubic centimeter four-strokes. The roughly 2-to-1 displacement ratio was presented as a fair performance balance. It was anything but. Honda's RC211V, a unique 990 cubic centimeter V5 four-stroke with a 75.5-degree cylinder angle, debuted producing around 210 horsepower, comfortably exceeding the final NSR 500. By 2006, it would reach 260 horsepower at 16,500 revolutions per minute. In the inaugural 2002 MotoGP season, four-stroke machines won every single one of the 16 races. Two-strokes managed only 5 podium finishes all year. The highest-placed two-stroke-only rider, Loris Capirossi, finished 8th in the overall championship standings. The two-strokes were not just beaten, they were humiliated. Riders who had been competitive on 500 cubic centimeter machinery suddenly found themselves fighting for minor points positions, while the new four-strokes disappeared up the road. By the 2003 Czech Grand Prix at Brno, the last two strokes started a MotoGP race. Then they vanished completely. The motivations behind the change were layered. Japanese manufacturers pushed hard for four-strokes because the 500 cubic centimeter two-stroke had absolutely zero connection to production motorcycle technology. Honda, Yamaha, Suzuki, and Kawasaki all sold four-stroke road bikes. None of them sold two-stroke sport bikes anymore. The racing program offered no research and development value for the machines sitting in dealership showrooms. Two-strokes are also inherently dirty, burning oil mixed with fuel and producing high hydrocarbon emissions. They were already disappearing from street bikes under tightening EPA standards in America and European emissions regulations in Europe. The World Superbike Championship, which raced production-based four-strokes, was stealing commercial relevance from Grand Prix racing. Something had to give. In 2007, when MotoGP cut engine capacity from 990 cubic centimeters to 800 cubic centimeters, the new regulations formally excluded two-strokes entirely, making official what had been reality since 2003. The 250 cubic centimeter class became four-stroke Moto2 in 2010. The 125 cubic centimeter class became four-stroke Moto3 in 2012. Two-stroke engines are now gone from every modern Grand Prix World Championship class. The modern echo of all this banned engineering sits in Kawasaki's showroom. The Ninja H2R, first released in 2015, is a 998 cubic centimeter supercharged inline-4, producing 310 horsepower. It is the most powerful production motorcycle engine ever built. It is also banned from every single FIM-sanctioned racing series, because the 1,946 supercharger prohibition still applies. The H2R exists purely as an engineering statement. A spiritual descendant of those 1980s turbo bikes and pre-war supercharged BMWs, it is similarly barred from competition by rules written long before it existed. Every one of these engines tells the same story. Build something brilliant, win with it. Watch someone rewrite the rules to stop you. The two-stroke dominated for 27 years before displacement formulas made it obsolete. Honda's oval-piston exploited one rule and inspired the creation of another, specifically banning it. Norton's rotary proved that a dying British manufacturer with a caretaker's shed and a brilliant engineer could embarrass the Japanese factories until the rulebook was rewritten overnight. The Briton proved one man in New Zealand could outbuild every factory on the planet, but homologation ensured it would never get the chance to prove it where it mattered most. BMW's supercharged flat twin was so fast in 1939 that the ban written to stop it is still in effect 80 years later. Very few of these ideas disappeared purely because they were beaten on merit alone. Again and again, the final blow came not on the racetrack, but in meetings, rule books, and homologation sheets. The real question about banned motorcycle engines is not whether the regulations were justified. Some of them clearly were. Two-strokes were maiming world champions. Supercharged bikes were too expensive for fair competition. Safety matters, and not every regulation is political. The real question is what we lost along the way. What engines were never built because engineers looked at the rulebook first and the drawing board second? What prototypes were abandoned because regulations made them pointless before they ever turned a wheel? What would the Britten V1000 have done in World Superbike with proper factory support? What would a modern two-stroke look like with 21st century direct injection and electronic controls? What would happen if someone built a rotary motorcycle racer today with carbon fiber and computational fluid dynamics that Brian Crichton could only dream of? We will never know, and that might be the biggest cost of all.